One moment of misplaced trust can shatter a lifetime of innocence. Stay with me, because this story will change how you see faith to every parent and every soul watching tonight. May we never bring into this world a child who becomes our deepest regret. This is the story of Chloe Tracos. At 18, Chloe's spirit bloomed like a rose, untouched by dust. In her small village atop Mapoma Hills, her laughter warmed each clay-tiled hut at dawn, and her smile could chase away the gloomiest clouds. Every morning she rose before the sun, her bare feet touching the red earth as she joined her mother, Layla, in prayer. In the simple kitchen, Leela pressed a hand-stitched Bible into Chloe's hands and whispered, "May your words carry hope where shadows linger." Her father, Reuben, straightened her shawl and said, "Go with courage, Chloe. Let your light shine beyond these hills." With tear-bright eyes, she nodded, stepping onto the dusty road that led to a world she had only dreamed of by mid-morning. Chloe stood at the towering gates of Maggie Springs University, red brick spires framed by blooming jacaranda trees. And the hum of engines drifted through the air, so different from the hush of chapel worship. She shouldered her small bag and took a deep breath, her heart brimming with purpose and a quiet ache for home. Around her, a swirl of neon dresses and designer bags caught the sunlight as new students hurried past. Chloe's simple cotton skirt and hand-woven scarf made her feel small. Yet she clung to the Bible tucked into her bag like a lifeline. Inside the dormitory, the hallway buzzed with chatter. Her roommates Sienna, Amina, and Layla eyed her with curious smiles. Sienna, with her booming laughter and glittering heels, teased, "You'll blend right in eventually." Amina scrolled through her phone with lacquered nails, and Layla's perfume filled the corridor like a storm. Evening, Chloe arranged her one bunk beneath a narrow window and pinned above it a slip of paper. "Do not conform to this world. Flee every hint of darkness." As the city's distant lights began to shimmer, Chloe knelt by her bedside lamp, Bible open on her lap. She whispered soft prayers into the quiet, each word a promise to herself and to the God she trusted. Hum of nighttime traffic was a reminder that she was far from Mapoma Hill's end, far from the innocence she once knew. Anchored by her faith, Chloe drifted into an uneasy sleep, unaware of the tests that awaited. Outside, the campus pulsed with life music, laughter, and the soft whisper of temptation. Tomorrow, her journey would lead her deeper into this new world, and the choices she faced would shape her future in ways she could never imagine. As dawn broke on her second day at Maggie Springs, Chloe awoke with a curious mixture of determination and unease. She dressed quietly in her simple cotton skirt and headed to the university cafeteria, where the scent of fried plantains and steaming tea mingled with chatter about weekend plans. When she opened her purse, her heart sank. Only a few coins lay inside. She forced a polite smile at the lunch server and accepted a small bowl of porridge. Every spoonful reminded her of home, where food was plentiful and love was never measured in coins. By mid-morning, Chloe's stomach grumbled louder than the lecture hall's overhead fan. In the crowded auditorium, she struggled to focus on the professor's words about African oral traditions, her mind drifting back to the empty larder in her dorm. Her classmates passed around snacks, samosas dripping with oil, chocolate bars wrapped in bright foil, but Chloe simply closed her eyes and prayed for strength. When the bell finally rang, she slipped out before anyone noticed her retreat. That afternoon, in the dorm corridor, Chloe bumped into Zara Moinji, a fellow freshman with kind eyes and a knowing smile. Zara wore a chic denim jacket and carried a nylon bag heavy with takeaway fried rice. "Hey, Chloe, look pale," Zara whispered, offering a heaping container. "Eat, you'll feel better." Grateful tears sprang to Chloe's eyes as she accepted the food. The relief was immediate. Her parched mouth savored every grain. "Thank you," she murmured, voice trembling. "I'll pay you back." Zara shook her head. "No need. Consider it sister's charity." That evening, as Chloe washed away the day's dust in the communal bathroom, she replayed Zara's generosity in her mind and the ache it dissolved. Yet a new thought stirred. What else could I do to keep this lifeline open? When she returned to her room, she found another surprise waiting. A slender envelope tucked beneath her door. Inside lay several bills enough to cover her next week's meals, and a short note: God provides in unexpected ways. Trust Him. Chloe's pulse raced. A gift so generous felt like an invitation and a test. Over the next 2 days, Chloe focused on her studies, determined to prove herself worthy of this unseen kindness. She attended lectures on Swahili poetry and African philosophy, taking meticulous notes and raising her hand to answer questions. Her confidence grew, yet her purse remained embarrassingly thin. Each night another envelope appeared, a silent promise that she would not starve. But in the hush of her room, Chloe wrestled with guilt. Is this charity or something else? She wondered, her faith a fragile flame flickering against the dark uncertainty. By the fourth evening, Zara confided over hushed giggles in the stairwell. You know who sends that money, right? It's Professor Dalo. He's impressed by your devotion and dedication. At the mention of his name, Professor Ezekiel Dalo, reputed for his mentorship of promising students, Chloe felt both relief and dread. He respects your faith, Zara said. He wants to help you succeed. Chloe's heart pounded. She remembered his warm smile at orientation and the gentle way he had encouraged her to join the campus Bible study. But now his assistance took on a new dimension, one that made her stomach tighten with fear as well as gratitude. That night, unable to sleep, Chloe knelt beside her bunk and whispered, Father, guide me. Show me the right path. The campus lights outside glowed like distant stars, but inside her chest a storm raged. She dared not call her parents. Her pride and their sacrifices weighed heavily on her. Tomorrow, she resolved, she would meet Professor Dalo during his office hours and thank him in person. She would confirm that his help was honorably, clarify the boundaries of their arrangement. When morning arrived, Chloe stood before the professor's ornate wooden door, her Bible clutched to her chest. She knocked lightly. His deep voice beckoned her in. Inside, he rose from behind his polished desk, concern and pride shining in his eyes. Chloe, he greeted, your working class has been exemplary. How can I support your journey today? Chloe's lips trembled as she placed the envelopes on his desk. Sir, thank you for your generosity. But I need to understand, what do you expect in return? He paused, leaning forward. Warm lamplight caught the edges of his silver-framed spectacles. Only your promise to excel, to lead others in truth, and to keep this between us, he said softly. His words were soothing, yet Chloe sensed an unspoken weight behind them. She nodded, voice catching. I promise. As she left his office, clutching her Bible and a heavier purse, Chloe wondered whether her vow had safeguarded her integrity or bound her to a debt she could never truly repay. By the end of the second week, Chloe's relief at meeting her basic needs had given way to a gnawing unease. Each envelope on her pillow felt like a tether, binding her gratitude to an unspoken obligation. She excelled in her coursework. Her paper on Swahili proverbs was selected for the student magazine. And during campus chapel, she led the closing hymn with clear, unwavering voice. Yet behind that confidence, her heart pounded every time she passed Professor Dalo's office. Late one afternoon, Chloe slipped into the corridor outside his suite. Dalo emerged, briefcase in hand, and offered her a warm smile. Chloe, your scholarship committee is impressed, he said, pressing a sealed envelope into her palm. They want to fund your field research in rural art traditions? Chloe's breath caught. This grant would cover tuition for the semester. She forced a grateful smile and tucked the envelope into her bag. But as she walked back to the dorm, the weight of that gift pressed on her chest. What price am I paying? She whispered to herself in the empty stairwell. Memories of Zara's teasing promise at orientation flickered. Just say yes and nothing will go missing. Chloe halted, pressing her hand to her Bible tucked against her heart. That night she prayed until dawn's first light, begging for clarity. when Dallo invited her to dinner in his campus apartment to discuss research details. Something inside Chloe quailed. But the stench of her empty purse and the fear of returning to porridge-driven days drove her forward. She arrived, dressed in her modest best, clutching her Bible-like armor. The apartment was warm, lit by a single lamp, heavy curtains drawn. Dallo poured 2 glasses of wine, his eyes gentle. "Chloe," he said, voice low, "you have so much. Promise, let me help you shine." His hand found hers across the table. She squeezed her eyes shut, recalling her mother's voice. "True help honors your worth." She pulled away, voice trembling. "Sir, I appreciate your generosity, but I must keep our relationship professional." He smiled an edge of disappointment, touching his gaze and stood. Instead of anger, he reached for her shoulder. "You're too honest," he murmured, leaning in. Chloe froze as his lips brushed her temple. In that moment, all her convictions wavered beneath the weight of his power and her own desperation. She did not pull away. A single stolen kiss, and the line between mentor and predator dissolved. Afterward, Chloe fled the apartment, tears blurring her vision. In the dark courtyard, she sank to the steps and pressed her palms to her face, trembling. "Forgive me," she whispered. Her scholarship stroke of luck had become an act of betrayal of herself and of the faith she held sacred. The next morning, she attended chapel in a daze. When her voice cracked during the opening hymn, sympathetic glances among the congregation felt like needles. Back in her room, Chloe paced, heart heavy. She knew her secret would grow roots if she didn't uproot it soon. That evening, Zara found her rocking on the bunk. "You seem different," she said, placing a bowl of soup on the bedside table. Chloe stared at the steaming broth, her appetite gone. "I did something," she confessed, voice hoarse. Zara's expression flickered between pity and concern. "Tell me," she urged. But Chloe only shook her head, tears slipping free, as Zara left. Chloe notched a vow on an imaginary ledger. She would reclaim her dignity or lose herself entirely. By the 3rd week, Chloe believed she could compartmentalize her shame. Each morning she greeted the dawn with a whispered prayer, clutching her Bible and steeling herself for lectures. But beneath her crisp blouse and neatly tied scarf, her body betrayed her. Nausea struck without warning. First a fleeting wave during chapel practice, then fierce retching in the dorm's communal bathroom. Each heave echoed her growing terror. One afternoon, Amina discovered Chloe hunched over the sink, palms gripping the cool porcelain. "Chloe?" she asked softly, eyes wide. Chloe managed a shaky smile, "Just feeling a bit unwell." But that evening, when a discarded test strip lay folded on the rickety floor, Amina's gasp shattered the fragile silence. 2 pink lines proof of what Chloe already dreaded. Her future, once gleaming with promise, dimmed beneath that stark truth. Crouched on the edge of her bunk, Chloe pressed her face into her trembling hands. Fear clutched at her throat. She thought of her mother's beaming pride back home, of Reuben's words, "Let your light shine." How could she now return as a bearer of scandal? That night, sleep fled her as she whispered laments into the thin darkness. The envelope of guilt growing heavier than any grant stipend. At dawn, Chloe summoned courage for one person only, her mother. Through crackling connection, she confessed. In halting tones, Leela's sobs crackled over the line. "My daughter," her voice broke, "we will face this together." She instructed Chloe to keep the secret until they could plan. "I'll send help when I can. Trust me." That promise held Chloe afloat, a lifeline in the storm of impending disgrace. Back on campus, Chloe wore her faith-like armor. In lectures, she excelled. In chapel, she led hymns with a steady voice. Yet every prayer ended with a question. "Father, what now?" Her roommates noticed the sickly pallor, the exhaustion in her gaze, but to each inquiry, Chloe offered only a gentle smile and a whispered, "I'm fine." As the weeks passed, Chloe's belly began to swell beneath her uniform. She learned to drape her shawl just so, to tuck her notes strategically, to carry books heavy in her arms, to obscure the curve. The hallways buzzed with gossip about upcoming award ceremonies and society events. But Chloe moved among them like a ghost present, but unseen. One evening, to the flicker of dormitory lights, Zara cornered her in the stairwell. "You're glowing pregnant," she said, voice unsteady with compassion and curiosity. Chloe's eyes filled. "It's complicated," she murmured, forcing herself to step away. Zara left her with a silent promise. "When you're ready, I'll stand by you." Still, Chloe felt alone. She wondered whether Professor Dallo even noticed, whether his next envelope would appear, or whether her secret would cost her the very scholarship she'd stolen through compromise. Anxiety gnawed at her every footstep, every handheld Bible dot at the end of the week. The chapel council announced a special ceremony to recognize outstanding students. Chloe's name was at the top of the list. The congregation's applause would echo through the vaulted ceiling, but Chloe's honor felt like an impossible weight. On the morning of the awards, she knelt before her mirror, adjusting her robes until the curve was disguised. "I will not fail," she whispered. But her voice trembled that as she stepped into the chapel, every eye turned to her. The hush settled like a tide, hearts lifting for the young woman they believed perfect. Pastor Samuel cleared his throat too. "Introduce her." Chloe's cheeks burned not with pride, but with dread. Each footfall toward the pulpit felt like walking a tightrope above an abyss. When she reached the lectern, she gripped the edges until her knuckles whitened. Her speech began smoothly, words of gratitude, verses about perseverance. But mid-sentence, a pang like lightning lanced through her belly. Chloe faltered. Silence rippled through the rows of pews. The congregation held its breath. In that crucible of expectation and fear, Chloe realized she could not carry both her secret and her truth any longer. Her voice cracked. She took a stuttering breath. Then, instead of reciting the next line, she spoke what had been festering in her soul. "I am not the daughter you think I am." Shock reverberated like thunder. Ladies gasped. Gentlemen shifted uncomfortably. And Chloe felt the pulpit under her fingers tremble as she stepped back. Her belly pressing against the pulpit's edge, the first whispers rose. "She's lying. What's wrong with her?" But before panic could consume her, Chloe raised her hand for silence. Her voice steadied, not with rehearsed lines, but with raw honesty. "I carry a secret that has broken my heart and shaken my faith. I am expecting a child." The chapel erupted, some in outrage, some in tears, many in stunned silence. Chloe's moment of plagiarism became a moment of power. Exposed, unvarnished, human. As she stepped down from the pulpit, knees quaking, Chloe knew that her life had irrevocably changed. The path ahead was uncharted, but for the first time in weeks, she felt the weight of secrecy lift. Beginnings were born not just of innocence, but of courage. The moment Chloe's confession echoed through the chapel, a storm broke free. Some elders leaped to their feet, murmuring for discipline. Others wept openly, shamed that the sanctuary they loved had sheltered betrayal. Pastor Samuel's lips trembled as he stepped forward, but his voice caught in his throat. Layla rushed to Chloe's side, gathering her daughter into a fierce embrace, even as the congregation recoiled in the tense hush that followed. Chloe's gaze swept over faces she once trusted, now contorted by confusion and sorrow. She remembered the envelopes, the whispered promises from Professor Dallo and other spiritual guides, and felt their weight vanish as truth took shape. This moment, raw and unprotected, became her liberation. That afternoon, the church council convened. In the vestry, Elder Wambui's silver hair glowed in the late-day sun as she read Chloe's statement aloud. Item by item, secret meetings, envelopes slipped beneath doors, exploitations carried out under the guise of mentorship. Each sentence landed like a thunderclap. Pastor Samuel, voice heavy with regret, announced, "We will cooperate fully with the university and the civil authorities. No sacred office places one above the law." Outside, a cluster of students and villagers gathered as news spread. Some held placards demanding justice. Kah. Others offered quiet comfort. Zara and Amina flanked Chloe, hands entwined in solidarity. Word arrived that Professor Dalo had been suspended and summoned by the dean. Other complicit faculty would face inquiry. In that moment, Chloe understood that her courage had kindled more than personal redemption, had sparked a community reckoning. At the Treyakos household that evening, the atmosphere was electric with sorrow and resolve. Reuben paced the living room, Bible open but unread, as villagers whispered prayers through the windows. Layla, tears still glistening, sat beside Chloe, stroking her hair. "You did what no one else dared," she murmured. "Your truth has made us all accountable." Chloe leaned into her mother's strength, feeling both hollow and unburdened. Over the next day, official summons arrived. Chloe would give a formal testimony to the university's tribunal. Though terrified of reliving each violation, she steeled herself with the memory of her mother's promise. In the crisp morning air, she walked through Maji Springs campus, not as a trembling victim, but as an agent of change. Whispers followed her, but so did nods of respect from young women who saw in her the possibility of standing firm. When she entered the tribunal hall, Chloe's pulse thundered. At one side sat Dean Mukunda, his expression stern but compassionate. On the other, Professor Dalo in handcuffs, eyes averted. More than a dozen witnesses, students, and staff waited to corroborate Chloe's account. In a calm, unwavering tone, she recounted every detail: the grants, the deadlines in his office, the silent compromises, the solitary nights of prayer and shame. Every word landed with the authority of lived truth. By the end of the testimony, the verdict was swift. Dalo's career was over, and an investigation into institutional safeguards was launched. A choir of relief and applause rose in the tribunal. Proof that honesty could dismantle even the most insidious power structure. That evening, Chloe returned to the chapel, this time to one that felt smaller, yet infinitely more sacred. In place of her usual hymn, she led the congregation in a new refrain. Justice rolls like rivers, truth shines like the sun. No fear obstructs the pathway when God's will is done. Her voice, tempered by trial, carried a resonance that no perfect note of innocence ever could. As villagers joined in, hands lifted, tears fell not of shame alone, but of shared healing. Walking home under the jacaranda canopy, Chloe felt the gentle stir of hope. Though the scars on her heart would linger, she knew her story had forged a path for others. In the quiet of that starlit night, she whispered a final prayer of gratitude for the courage to speak, for a community willing to listen, and for the dawn that follows every night of reckoning. When the morning sun gilded the chapel steps, Chloe Traiacos stood before the congregation not as the perfect songbird they once adored, but as a woman tempered by fire and fortified by truth. Her voice rose in a new hymn, one born of honest confession and communal healing. From broken ground a forest grows, through tears of pain a river flows. Our scars become the map we share in mercy's arms, where answered prayer. Her melody carried through vaulted ceilings, and as hands joined in solidarity, Chloe felt the weight of shame dissolve into shared song. Elder Wambui, her tear-streaked face alight, leaned forward and whispered, "You have led us into the light, my child." Over the next days, Chloe's schedule brimmed with purpose. She delivered guest lectures on trauma-informed care at the university's education department, urging future teachers and counselors to recognize the signs of exploitation. In a staff meeting with Dean Mukunda and the entire faculty senate, she stood poised and clear-eyed as she recounted the systemic changes still needed: fair pay for research assistants, transparent scholarship processes, regular audits of mentoring relationships. When she finished, the hall erupted in applause, not just for her courage, but for the blueprint she offered for real transformation. Away from the public eye, the Traiacos household flourished in quiet intimacy. Each evening, Reuben and Leela gathered around the fireplace to share hopes and fears for the baby on the way. Chloe, her hand resting over the gentle curve of new life, guided them through prayer for wisdom, unity, and protection. At times, the memories of her deepest despair surfaced like unwanted guests, her stomach twisting in a sudden pang of guilt. But the prayers she whispered every night wove those shadows into threads of resilience instead of ruin. In late September, Maggie Springs hosted its first Sunrise Sisters Conference, a day-long gathering of survivors, advocates, clergy, and students. Chloe opened the event with a keynote address under banners proclaiming voices unbroken and justice through unity. She spoke of her journey from innocence to exploitation to redemption, urging attendees to cultivate courageous compassion, the willingness to listen without judgment, to act without delay, and to love without reservation. Hundreds rose in a standing ovation as she concluded, "Our story does not end with our darkest deed. It begins with the light we choose to share." When October's jacarandas shed their last petals, Chloe stepped away from the spotlight for a moment of personal pilgrimage. Back to Mapoma Hills, in the humble chapel where her voice first soared. She cradled her belly, smiling through tears as she traced the familiar stone arches. Elder Wamboy's granddaughter, now a choir member, leaned close and asked, "How do you forgive yourself?" Chloe paused, inhaling the scent of damp earth and incense. "Forgiveness," she said softly, "begins when we accept that grace is greater than guilt and that our worth was never defined by our mistakes." Back in Maggie Springs, Chloe's final trimester brought anticipation and gentle fatigue. She swapped her counseling seminars for prenatal classes, learning to cradle the life she nearly abandoned. Sarah and Amina organized a baby shower under the university's jacaranda canopy, hand-stitched blankets, enamel bowls, and a chorus of feminine solidarity. As Chloe opened each gift, laughter mingled with tears, and the once isolated chapel maiden realized that her community had become her fortress. On a crisp November dawn, Chloe labored in the hospital's softly lit ward, the rhythmic beeping of monitors echoing her steady breaths. With Reuben's hand in hers and Leela's prayer on her lips, she welcomed her daughter, whom she named Mercy, into the world. As the newborn cried, her first fragile cry, Chloe whispered, "You are more than my mistakes. You are my hope." In that moment, every chapter of betrayal led to this single line of redemption. Weeks later, holding baby Mercy beneath a jacaranda tree in full bloom, Chloe addressed a small gathering of students from her safe sanctuary group. "This journey taught me," she said, "that healing is never solitary. We rise by lifting others, by speaking our truth, and by welcoming grace into the deepest parts of our story. May Mercy's life remind us that even in the darkest night, Dawn is certain. As the video draws to a close, Chloe's final words appear on screen. If my story moved you, share it with a friend. If you're struggling in silence, reach out to Are Never Alone. Subscribe for more real-life testimonies, and remember, courage is contagious. The screen fades to a warm gold as Chloe rocks Mercy, the skyline of jacaranda petals drifting. Around them, enduring testament that from broken earth, new life and new hope always emerge.